Antoinette Ferreira, you are a senior advocate, prosecutor in the prosecution office in the province of Free State. And your focus is primarily on prosecuting wildlife crime offences.
That's correct.
Tell us about your job. Tell us about successes, frustrations.
Well, it's a wonderful job to work with something that you are passionate about, and especially wildlife crime. Successes, I was one of the first prosecutors in the country to use the Prevention of Organised Crime Act to prosecute a syndicate for abalone poaching. That was in Welkom in Free State Province as well. And also one of the first prosecutors to use it in a rhino poaching syndicate case, where the hunter essentially got sentenced to 10 years imprisonment for poaching rhinos in both Kruger Park as well as on private-owned land. Frustrations to the job, there's a lot of work involved, as well as your normal duties prosecuting other high-profile cases like murders, hijacking, so I don't have the leisure of just working with environmental crimes alone.
Do we have adequate legislation to make your job as prosecutor effective and worthwhile?
I think in the whole of, if you look at the whole spectrum of legislation, yes, there's a lot of good laws involved. It's the where we lack is enforcing it properly, and the sentences prescribed we hardly ever get in a court of law. So there we are lacking. Therefore, it's my view that an amendment to legislation to add a minimum sentence to certain wildlife crime is necessary.
What type of minimum sentence do you have in mind?
I would say 15 years for the poaching of a rhino is sufficient. Our minimum legislation, the Criminal Law Amendment Act 105 of 97, prescribes, for instance, for theft of a value of over 100,000, a minimum sentence of 15 years. Therefore, any rhino is worth more than 100,000, and killing a rhino is essentially same as removing the ownership permanently.
If there was to be a minimum sentence of 15 years for a conviction on killing a rhino, would there not be a response from the judiciary or from other critics that you're prescribing the sentences to magistrates in the courts?
There was strong opposition by magistrates when this legislation came into play originally, because they essentially felt it made them rubber stamps and took away their discretion. However, in that act, there are certain provisions, Section 51.3, for instance, or 53, that says under certain circumstances, you don't have to impose that minimum sentence, but there must be compelling and substantial circumstances proven to deviate from the prescribed minimum.
Now, in the many interesting presentations that we've had in this seminar, the issue of corruption featured quite frequently. The fact that corruption contributes to the inability of law enforcement and others to be more effective in protecting wildlife. Have you come across that?
My entire job consists of working around corrupt officials, and especially on a high level, when you work for, with instance, the DPCI, which are commonly known as the Hawks, police officers, you are dealing mainly with corrupt officials, and it seriously hampers a person's ability to do the job properly. You have to be very careful where information is shared and so forth. It's quite challenging. And corruption is, so to say, the white elephant in the room that no one wants to touch and no one has a solution for. But that, to me, is one of the biggest challenges in my job.
Do you think it's possible to come with more effective law enforcement responses without first addressing corruption?
That's a difficult question, but I think, for instance, if you pay policemen more, there will be less of an enticement for them to take bribes and more of an incentive to do the job properly. However, corruption, this cannot carry on if it's not tackled head on. We will certainly lose this war, and especially in rhino poaching.
From your experience in prosecuting cases involving wildlife crime, have you noticed any trends whether it has remained more or less static, increased or decreased, or is that difficult for you to say?
No, there definitely are trends involved. Initially, a syndicate would specialize in one type of product. Now we see there's a division of products and labor within a syndicate, and even that syndicates are collaborating with each other, different types of the mafia with the Y or the 14K, and there's collaboration between syndicates and severely impacting on the increase of the crimes in the wildlife industry.
Let's just unpack that. You're saying that the criminal networks that are involved have moved away from illicitly dealing with one product only into a multiple number of products. Just give us an idea of what it would be.
Indeed. For instance, abalone, rhino horn, drugs are all now part of one syndicate's products that they are illicit products they're dealing in. And that involves also to avoid being prosecuted for money laundering, you would rather exchange drugs for rhino horn, for instance, instead of paying cold hard cash and exposing yourself to further prosecution of more crimes than would have been necessary if you get caught.
And are you talking about mainly South African-based criminal networks, or have you also come across, let's call them international networks with international links?
Definitely, the networks operating in our country are international. It's definitely a transnational occurrence. Our own syndicates are aiding them for sure, because it's not easy for an Asian person, for instance, to know where rhinos are and where do you find them in the bush. They do need assistance from local guys, but there's a definite collaboration between the syndicates now.
And when it comes to investigating the activities of international criminal networks, those with links outside the borders, what do you do as a South African authority? How do you go about that?
It's a very cumbersome process. That's when you start talking about mutual legal assistance, which could take years just to get certain information from across your own borders. However, with Interpol and the new movement towards tackling wildlife crime, there are a lot of international agencies now getting involved in this fight. So it does make it a bit easier, although when it comes to the proper legal process, it's cumbersome. It's quite difficult to investigate outside your borders.
Do you have ideas as to how one could perhaps make that more effective, speed it up, have more direct contact?
I know, for instance, the Asian WEN support program has made it much easier for their agencies to work together on an international basis, whereby you just belong to this agency and there's a much more free flow of information. And that would be a good thing if, for instance, South Africa could belong to that. It would really assist us.
Are you on the impression that we have adequate technical know-how and equipment to effectively investigate the entire chain from source to destination, the money flows?
That's a very difficult thing to follow up, because with technical issues we have, for instance, the flow of money, electronic transfers, for instance. If you don't have a tip-off, it's very difficult to know where to start looking for cash money that's involved, payments for crimes. On another field, we do have proper equipment for monitoring and so forth. And we have very specialized guys, cybercrime investigators, that have the knowledge. But I think there is a lack of resources in that effect. And these investigative methods also cost a lot of money. That's probably another challenge we face.